And hello, everybody. Welcome again to another edition of Double Cross Radio. My name is Chuck Horton, and I'm your host tonight, coming to you live from the scorched earth of Southern Oregon, Eastern Oregon, the Cascade Mountains, the Northwest. Reminds me of a line in a movie. Actually, it was a TV series first, Firefly, and then the movie was Serenity. Burn the land and boil the sea. You can't take the sky from me. Well, they're doing the burn the land part. I just can't wait to see how they make the oceans boil. But I tell you, these people that think they can manage this world, they are so insidious and so incompetent that they would probably think they were trying to cool down the oceans to cool the earth, and they would make them boil. They're that bad at what they do. Great program again by Hal Anthony leading into our program tonight. I don't know how he knows what I'm going to want to talk about, but I mean, this is something that's near and dear to both our hearts. Awesome job, Hal. It's just awesome. It was, I tell you, if you want to listen to something he's got a lot more time to research, I think, than I do. He's got different facts and figures than I have, and I'd actually, because of my new business that I took on in January, I don't have a lot of time to spend doing research and finding facts that you can actually use to make logical arguments, but it's pretty hard to argue with the facts that we haven't really seen a clear blue sky day here for about 6 weeks. And I don't think it's going to stop until the end of this month, maybe sometime in October, when we finally get a rainstorm. It'll come down here and put this fire out. And in the meantime, it's just smoke. And generally, the Southern Oregon, the best part about living here is the summer. Spring's kind of wet sometimes, and it's kind of short. It turns into summer real early, and towards the end of April, first part of May, and we still get a shower here and there. The fall is beautiful. You get the colors, get the warm days and cold nights. But summer is just awesome. But not this summer, not last summer, not the summer before, not the summer before that. We're being smoked out of our homes, our place of where we live, and I cannot remember 4 summers as bad as the 4 summers we're experiencing right now. This is the worst of the 4. And tragically, some people who are seeking work perished in the fire up in Washington. It's not all the same fire, but it seems like it's the same fire to me. And as Hal talked about in his show, the mismanagement of these public lands is just obscene. I want you to think of the value of the timber that's going up in smoke. Now, if you were a business and you had you kept books in your business, you'd have your assets, that's the trees, and they'd have a certain value. And let's just for the sake of not having another term, let's just say that the trees that you had in these millions of acres that you owned were worth $1 billion. On paper, you'd be worth $1 billion if they all burned up. You'd be worth nothing. Well, these are our lands. They belong to the public. You've just lost $1 billion worth of net worth, public. Maybe more. And it's the same story that's happened summer after summer after summer. And, we could do some things to cut our losses a little bit, to salvage some of the trees that didn't burn completely, that are still, you can still cut them down and get some usable lumber out of them and make something out of it. You can make a little bit of money out of it. Get some of the the money back into, you could create jobs, and it would stimulate some part of your economy. You'd be able to produce something of value that other people will be glad to trade with you for. But no, they have to go through environmental statements, and they take months and months and months, and court battles, and months and months and months more. And by the time they get around to saying, okay, you can do it, the wood has rotted and isn't worth anything. And there are people that know how to work in the woods. They know how to cut down trees. They know how to load them onto log trucks and to take them to the mills and to work in the mills and to produce products that other people were willing to pay money for. But they're not able to work because the system has been, someone threw a wrench in the gears, and everything is ground to a standstill. And not only are people not working, but this vast resource that they said had to be preserved at the cost of the jobs of all these people that used to work in the woods, it's burning down. And if we have a couple more summers like this, there won't be any trees to go and harvest ever again. Or at least not in our lifetimes. It'll take 50 to 100 years to regrow these forests the way they used to be before they burnt to the ground. And the reason I say this is in a normal forest fire, there isn't the incredible load of fuel in the forest that there is today. 100 years ago, when there was a forest fire, it would burn sparsely, burn itself out because there wasn't enough fuel to keep it going. The temperatures were hot enough, the winds could be blowing, but if there's nothing there to burn, it just won't burn. Today's forest fires burn so hot because there's so much fuel on the floor of the forest. There's so many downed trees that haven't been cleaned and salvaged and brought out of there. There's so much brush growing that is not cleared for the logger to come in and cut down trees. The forest just goes on and on and on and on. There used to be clear cuts every once in a while that would be act like a fire break when there was a fire. Those are all disappeared. There's nothing to stop these fires. They burn so hot, they actually burn the seeds. Before, the fires would be hot enough to open up the pine cones, release the seeds into the soil, and the next year seedlings would sprout and they would start to regrow a new forest. Not anymore. These fires are so catastrophic, they burn so hot, it'll take 50 years at a minimum to regrow these forests. And I'm 63 years old, almost 64 years old. It's not going to happen in the rest of my life. If you're older than 25 years old, it's probably not going to happen in your lifetime either. Think how many people working in the forests over a 50-year period, how much wealth they could produce with their labor, harvesting these trees, taking the mills, replanting the harvested trees so the forest continues to grow and replace the trees that are cut down with new trees. If you don't have a forest that's wiped out like these, you can regrow a forest depending on your elevation in 20 to 40 years. On the average, 30 years. It cuts that reforestation down by 20 years, the time it takes to do that. And you can do it on a sustained yield basis where you're just harvesting what you're replanting, so you can do it so you'll always have about the same amount of forest to harvest every year. Sure, there'll still be some fires, you'll still have some losses. But like I said, the clear cuts act like a fire break. You're continually removing the fuel loads from the forest floor. They're not going to burn down as catastrophically as they do now, so they'll be naturally replanting themselves with the seeds from the cones. These forest practices that are being put in place are being put in place by bureaucrats that don't know shit from Shinola. And for some reason we think because they're appointed or they have some title that they have knowledge that the rest of us don't have. I tell you, if you've ever lived out in the area where there are forests and you've gone out and walked in the forest, you can tell when a forest is being managed properly and when it isn't. A lot of times there's still some private lands out here. And a lot of times these fires are burning, they'll burn right up to the edge of these private lands, and then they'll burn out. Why? because the people that own the private lands have removed all that fuel load from the forest floor, and there's nothing left to burn but just the bark on the trees and the branches, which are actually they're kind of moist because they're a living tree. They're not, and the fires aren't burning hot enough to drive that moisture out of the trees and make them burn fast enough, and they just kind of, it'll burn into a few feet, 10, 20 feet into the private land, and then it'll burn itself out. They won't destroy those private lands. The lands that are being destroyed are the public lands that are under management of the Forest Service and the BLM. And I tell you, the next time either one of those agencies does something correct in our forests, it's going to be the first time. These guys have done almost exactly the opposite of what would be good forest management. In their existence, they have not provided good stewardship of these lands. And these lands belong to the public. It's like Woody Guthrie said, this land is your land, it's my land. These forests are our lands. They're public lands. They're not the government's lands. They're public lands. They don't belong to the government. They belong to the public. And they're being destroyed. And the people that are in these agencies that are promoting these policies, that are causing these catastrophic fires, they need to be dismissed from their office. It shouldn't be a political office. It shouldn't be something that you get for donating money to a campaign or for organizing whatever, being politically correct on certain stance that the administration favors, the current administration favors. It should be someone who really understands what forests are, what a living forest looks like. And that hasn't happened at all. And I tell you, I get tired of waking up every day and looking out and I can't see my mountains. Those of you who've been in Medford or live in the Medford area, you know what I'm talking about. We're surrounded by mountains here, and they're beautiful. And you kind of don't appreciate what they are. Sometimes you live here a long time. When my wife first came here from Poland, I told her, so now there's some beautiful mountains in the Cascades. I was thinking about Mount McLaughlin, Mount Peelson, some of the ones further north up in the Bend area, like the Three Sisters and Broken Top, and so on, and Mount Jefferson. There's a lot of pretty mountains in the Cascades, including Mount Hood. And but around here, I kind of think of a mountain as something that's above the timberline, it's got snow on it most of the year. And around here, the mountains we have are probably, most of them peak out somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 feet. So they're not really like those kind of mountains you see up there. Mount McLaughlin's closer to 10,000 feet, and Mount Hood's about 14, I think, or 12 to 14, somewhere in there. I don't know exactly what it is. I didn't plan to talk about Mount Hood today. It just came to my mind. But all these mountains that we have, they're beautiful. I love to hike in these mountains and spend time in them, but it's not any fun to go hiking up there and just be engulfed in smoke the whole day. And a few years ago, in the first year after I retired from my previous business, I spent all summer hiking. I climbed 14 mountains that summer. And that was one of the best summers of my life. And I loved that summer because the climbing to the top of a mountain, it's kind of exhausting sometimes if it's a tough climb. Sometimes it's a pretty easy walk. If it's like I summited Mount Ashland, which those of you who live in this area are probably laughing right now, saying, well, how hard was that? Well, it depends on where you start and what trail you take, but it wasn't hard at all. But it was still a hike, and it was still an all-day deal, and we could have parked closer to the top and walked a shorter distance, but we planned out a good place to park and made our hike. It was I wouldn't call it difficult. It was a little bit harder than easy, but not really even average difficulty. And it was a wonderful day, and you got to the top, and I could see my house from the top. And I got my binoculars out, and I could see my house from the top of the mountain. And so I'm flashing my wife with the mirror, saying, we're here. I don't know if she could see it or not. She said she did, but I don't know if she really did. Anyway, the point I'm making is that the forests and mountains and the area where I live, it's just a beautiful place. It's one of the prettiest places on the face of the planet. It has fabulous natural resources. It is a fabulous place for growing trees. It's an awesome place for growing grapes. It's an awesome place for fruit trees. It's the home of Harry and David, for God's sake. And the Forest Service and the BLM, through their mismanagement, are burning it to the ground. Now, they didn't go out there and cause the lightning strikes. And they didn't set fire to these things personally, but they allowed, through their mismanagement, for these fuel loads to accumulate to such an extent that when a lightning strike did strike, it was sure to burn down thousands of acres, and in this case, cost the lives of 3 firefighters up in Washington. There have been lots of buildings burned to the ground. People who rurally live out in this area. Just incredible damage to property, private property. Incredible damage to the resource that these living trees are. Incredible environmental damage. You guys say we can't cut down these trees because it damages the environment. Well, I've got to tell you, there aren't too many animals going to be living in this environment after these fires because they're burning everything to a crisp. They're burning so hot there's not going to be anything left living for years to come in these areas. Maybe a few wind-blown seeds will blow in and we'll have some weeds or whatever growing, but there's not going to be a habitat for animals. Not anything that, it's going to be a moonscape. There won't be anything that's, worth writing about. Even when Mount St. Helens exploded, it did not do the kind of damage that these forest fires are doing. And if you say, well, how do you know, Chuck? How do you know? Well, it's happened before. Many, many years ago, there was a devastating fire up along the Oregon coast in the Tillamook County. It was called the Tillamook Burn. And that forest fire, it was a very dry summer, like we've had this summer. And it was also a poorly managed forests. They were trying to grow as many trees as possible. They had them too close together. The fuel load was incredibly high. This forest fire burned so hot, it took them over 50 years to regrow this forest. And a lot of people who owned those lands went bankrupt. The counties foreclosed on the land because they couldn't pay the taxes. The land went to the state, and the state started to manage the forests. And the state foresters are quite a bit more, have more of a power in the state of Oregon than the national foresters, the National Forest Service, or the Bureau of Land Management, or the Park Service. There's actually those 3 agencies do it, but the state of Oregon, because it's a smaller agency, wasn't mired in so much bureaucratic and political correctness, was successfully able to regrow these forests over a 50-year period of time. And this fire, which burned in Tillamook, and the flames from this fire were visible in Portland. Now, if you have a map handy with a scale on, you can see how far away Tillamook is from Portland. It's 60, 70 miles away. And there's a mountain range in between. The people in Portland could see flames from this fire. That's how hot this burning inferno was. And it was scorched earth. It looked like a moonscape when it was done. And today you drive through there and you wouldn't have believed that happened. So it was over 50 years ago. It was like 70 years ago, I think. And I wasn't planning on talking about Tillamook fire. I would have all these facts and figures about that for you as well. But the point is, these fires are going on and on and on. And as you move east, the amount of trees in the area aren't there, but there's all sorts of grasses that are burning. And these grass fires spread even faster, and they're really dangerous to people who live in homes out there. And why didn't these grass fires burn before? Because before, the farmers had cattle out there grazing on that grass and eating it up, so there wasn't anything to burn like that. But now, because they're trying to, quote-unquote, preserve the environment, they've kept the farmers from grazing their cattle out there, and so now it just burns to a crisp, and nothing's going to live after that for a few years. They've destroyed an environmental habitat. But yet, if a farmer were to put his cattle out there, they'd send him to prison for destroying that habitat. Yet their mismanagement is doing the exact same thing, and they get to still collect their monthly salary, make their house payment, drive in a real expensive new car, have a government pension. These people make me sick. When are we going to start holding these public officials accountable for their actions? When are they going to have to pay an economic price for their mismanagement? At what time is that ever going to happen? When are the people that live in these areas are going to rise up and say, we demand that these people resign their office? That'd be a minimum. I would demand that federal prosecutors prosecute them for malfeasance of office. That's a crime. There are lives being ruined. These fat cats, they don't care. That might be their plan. I doubt they're so devious that they go out there and intentionally want to destroy people's lives, but I don't think they care when they do, because they're all right. Their salary is guaranteed. They don't care. It's collateral damage. In a country where over 1 million, I think it's 1.5 million babies are aborted every year now, is life really something we care about anymore? Life was one of the three things that was mentioned in the Declaration of Independence, that a natural right was to life, to liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We don't seem to care about the property. We don't care about the life and liberty. That was gone a long time ago. The nation that was founded by our forefathers who risked their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honor to overthrow a tyrant in England, overthrow his rule and establish a nation conceived in liberty. Those forefathers, they gave us this fabulous nation. And we've lost this nation without a shot being fired. We've lost it to an army of bureaucrats. Bureaucrats that don't do anything productive. They just destroy wealth. And they're so bad at their job, they ruin people's lives. And they don't just destroy wealth by squandering these huge salaries they get, which is twice what anybody in the private sector would ever get. But they destroy wealth through the malfeasance of their office and how the destructive policies that they put in place, which allow these forest fires to burn uncontrollably. And you can kind of tell I'm kind of emotional about this because I live here. And I see people that come in to my store and they're coughing. They're wearing masks. The masks are something I don't feel I need. My lungs are still pretty clear and able to process this. But I notice that I have a stuffed up nose every night when I go to bed. I notice that the days when we have less smoke because the wind blows in a different direction, that I breathe a lot easier and I sleep better. So it's more of an inconvenience for me at this point in time, but I know that there's a lot of people that used to work in the timber industry. They worked in a mill, or they worked falling trees, or driving log trucks, or being a choker setter. So you take the hook that they put around the tree and the cable, and you run it down the hill to the tree, and you set it on the tree, and they pull the tree up the hill and put it on a truck. And you run back up that hill and grab that heavy block and heavy hook and cable, and you run it back down the hill to the next tree, and you let them so they can pull that next tree up. And they do that from dawn to dusk, or until sometimes it's so dry and dangerous out there they only let them work till about 1 in the afternoon and they make them quit because they don't want to start another fire. That's how it used to be. Those people aren't working in the woods anymore. And those trees that were being cut down and thinned out, and those clear cuts, which everybody say look ugly, those clear cuts were a natural fire break that kept the forest fires from burning uncontrollably across the landscape. And those habitats that were there for all the animals are gone. Now, there's still forest out here. I don't want to give you the impression that it's just the whole thing's a moonscape. But I tell you, you fly over in a plane, and the areas that have been burned in the last 4 years are a lot uglier than any clear cut ever was. Oh, anyway, that's all we have about the forest fires. Hal Anthony also had great coverage on this tonight. And if you're listening to this, I suggest you go and, on a recording, I suggest you go and check out his recording. And also, I stand behind what Hal said. I really am pleased to come after his show every week. He's a great lead-in to what we do. Now, other things to talk about tonight. Oh, let's see. We have let's see. We had a lot of current events happen this week. News. I usually don't like to cover current events because I want the shows that we do to be kind of timeless. What I mean by timeless, I mean I want to be talking about ideas and concepts and things that people, they're the truth, but they're the truth always. They're not the truth today, and then when the paradigm shifts, they're no longer the truth. I want to talk about things that are always the truth. And sometimes I talk about the same thing over and over and over again from different angles, and I show you different examples of why it's the truth. But I thought that this week there were a couple things out there that illustrated some of these basic truths that are always true. Monday was a Black Monday. Stock market crashed, bounced up a little bit, and crashed hard again. And then I think it went down a little bit again on Tuesday. It came up a little bit Tuesday, and it ended up Wednesday up. It almost had created a dead cat bounce. And what do you mean by dead cat bounce? It had gone about 50% of the drop had been taken up by a rise in the average price of the Dow. And I didn't look before I came on today because I was busy listening to Hal. I didn't look to see whether it was up or down today, but I want you to know that this stock market crash is entirely caused by the Federal Reserve. There's no other cause. This is a bubble. The bubble is created by the inflationary policies of the Federal Reserve by having 0% interest rates. It allows money to be lent, and lending money is the same as printing it on a printing press. It's the same as counterfeiting. They loan out the money. People can get it at 0% interest. When they're looking for places to put it, there doesn't seem to be anything going on that was giving them a good return on investment, so a lot of it found its way into the stock market. The stock market was 17,500. It was an all-time high. It should be somewhere closer to 6,000 or 7,000. And I think that's probably where it's going to end up. We haven't seen the end of this, but I could be wrong. I mean, it's a lot of what's going on in the stock market is kind of emotional, smoke and mirrors. You've heard other terms to describe it. But basically, these stocks, there's really nothing being produced. The thing that's causing the prices to go up is that money has to be spent somewhere, and it's being invested in stocks, so they're buying stocks, and there's more buyers than there are sellers, so the price is going up. But I think it's peaked out. I don't think it's going up. It's not going to make a new high. It's not going to change the current short-term trend. It's going to continue to go down. And depending on what is done, it could take a long time to go down, but you're going to start to see, one of the things you're going to start to see with regard to this stock market crash, you're going to see a contraction in the economy. You're going to see contraction is the same as the opposite of inflation, deflation. And in that contraction, which is really a good thing, you're going to see a lot of commodities at their values are going to be lowered. So even gold and silver. And we're going to see gold and silver prices going down. We're going to see, and we've already seen oil prices dropping. Gasoline in Medford today, as I drove home, was $2.67 a gallon. gold and silver prices have gone down during this time, and some people are out there saying, I'm going to buy gold, I'm going to buy gold. I think if you want to buy gold, I think I would wait until it's gone down a little further and shows signs of hitting a bottom. I don't think there's any signs of that yet. And you'll know when it's hit a bottom, when it starts to go up and then it falls back down again, but it doesn't set a new low. And that's a good signal, and that'd be a good time to buy. And who knows how they'll go. It could go back down to $300 an ounce. I doubt it'll go quite that far, but it could definitely get down below. It's gone to below 1,000. It could go 600 or 700. I would wait until it fails to make a new low and starts to climb and it makes a new high, and that's a good time to buy it again. You're going to get your money's worth. Same with silver. And I'm not giving you investment advice. I just tell you that's what I would do, and I would really start to study this a little bit more carefully. If you're going to put a sizable amount of money into precious metals, I think I'd spend some time studying how the banking system works, how the Federal Reserve operates, how fractional reserve banking is a fraud. So you understand how those systems work, and then you understand how it can be used against you if you try and leverage your purchases, or if you don't just go out and own your own commodity. And you treat these precious metals as a long-term savings plan. If you bought an ounce of gold, it's going to have about the same purchasing power 20, 30 years from now as it has today. Who cares what it's worth in dollars? It's going to buy the same basket of commodities that it's buying today. So it's like a savings account. Think of it like that. It isn't an interest-bearing one. It's one that preserves the value of your capital. So that's what gold and silver are for. I like some people who think the whole world's spinning towards the end, which it could be. I'm not going to say they're crazy. I don't happen to share that belief. I think that things are going to be tough, but I don't think it's going to be Mad Max and Thunderdome time. It's what we're looking at is we're looking at just a time when people are gonna consume less. They're gonna make do with what they have. They're gonna grow more food in their own gardens. They're gonna try and do whatever they can to make the income that they do, the wealth that they produce, capture more and more commodities and basic human needs that they need to survive. Well, if we're having a contraction and prices are generally falling as a deflationary time enters, unless you're leveraged up to the, as much as you can, trying to kind of fractionally reserve your way into owning homes, and you've got trying to flip houses and things like that. Unless you're doing things like this, I don't think you have to fear deflation. The people that are using inflation as a way to put 5% down on a house, or let's say even they put 10% down, that's easy numbers. It's a $100,000 house. You put 10% down, that'd be $10,000. Let's say there was a modest inflation of 3%. That would go from $100,000 to $103,000. And that would be, so their house would increase in value by $3,000, but they only put $10,000 on it. So if they got $3,000 in increase in value on $10,000 investment. So they leverage that investment to give them a 30% return instead of a 3% return. Then they turn around and sell it, and they go and do it again. Well, if suddenly the house goes down in value, that leverage works against you the same way it was working for you during inflation, and it will pretty quickly bankrupt you. So those people are really afraid of deflation, and for a good reason, and they should have never done what they did in the first place. It's a huge risk. We're not going to bail you out. You knew the job was dangerous when you took it, so just, you're not too big to fail. You're just going to have to take it. It's crunch time. You're going to get crunched. So that's my take on the stock market crash. It's a bubble created by the Fed. The rise in the value in those stocks was caused by demand fueled by money created out of thin air. There was no wealth produced to produce that money. And it wasn't sustainable. And at some point in time, it had to come to an end. And I think this might be that time. If it isn't, if I'm wrong, I don't know what the Fed can do to make. They can't lower interest rates below zero unless they charge you to put money in the bank. And I don't think that's going to make people want to deposit their money there. They certainly won't want to keep it there very long if they do. So I think this is a stagnant economy. It's just going to stagnate until they finally decide to let the free market do its stuff. And then it'll take about a year or two for real recovery to actually be realized. I mean, we'll see signs of it happening, but it won't. There's a lot of things that need to be cleaned up. One of the things one of the early Austrian economists said is markets clear. And what he meant was that when you have a inflation that's caused, or a boom cycle that's caused by the fractional reserve banking or a central bank with a really horrible monetary policy like our federal bank, central bank, the Federal Reserve. Well, when that happens, it causes a lot of malinvestment. And when it's no longer sustainable, it never was sustainable, when it no longer is able to create any stimulus in the market, it will crash and the markets will clear. And it's a necessary thing that has to be done. It's not pleasant. Excuse me. It's not pleasant, but it's something that has to happen so we can reestablish the value of things in terms of another thing. And that's just something that has to happen. And it hasn't happened. Also, the current events in the news, and you guys are probably tired of hearing about this, and it's only been a day. The shooting of the news crew in a small town in Virginia. The gunman was, he had lots of problems, let's put it that way. And I have no doubt that he was under psychiatric care, at least seeing a psychologist or something for depression. He's probably taking some kind of antidepressant, which in a percentage of all people who take this, a certain percentage of them end up with violent or suicidal thoughts. And so it's like playing Russian roulette. You just keep giving those drugs to people, and eventually one of them goes off their rocker and just acts out violently, either against other people or against himself. And I just wonder why no one is asking these questions about was this person on Prozac, was he on some other kind of antidepressant drug. Suicide, is one of the leading causes of death in this country now. Thank you, pharmaceutical company. Okay, and finally, as I was getting ready for the show tonight, I happened to notice I had a recording of a speech by Dinesh D'Souza on my desktop, and I haven't listened to it for a while. This is a speech he made at Freedom Fest 2 years ago. As I speak right now, Dinesh D'Souza is in prison for violating campaign finance rules. Other people have done much worse violations than Dinesh D'Souza has done. And other people have done much worse crimes, not to mention they weren't anything to do with campaign finance rules, but just have had very serious criminal activities, including possible treason. And yet, Dinesh D'Souza is in prison, and these other criminals remain free, and they haven't even been charged. There's no investigation underway to gather evidence to put them on trial for their crimes. I think you know one of the people I'm talking about. mentioned her name several times on the show, and she's currently running for president of the United States. And I tell you, as much as I don't like Barack Obama, you don't want Hillary Clinton as your president. She will make Barack Obama look like the second coming of George Washington. You know, it's I think that she's probably not going to make it. A lot of people in her party are starting to realize, oh my God, she's a monster. And they're quietly trying to get her to suspend her campaign and kind of let it go away. I think a lot of her financial contributions, her funding is starting to dry up as people realize this woman is a real monster. And it's not just the embassy shooting in Libya. It's not just that. It's not just her causing the death of a U.S. ambassador. It's her casual disregard for rules and regulations. They're written for other people. They're written for us elites to prosecute the little people when we need to find something that they violated. It's just one of those rules and regulations handy to have when you need to bring some guy like Dinesh D'Souza down. And when you find that situation where you have a political enemy and you can prosecute him to the full extent of the law, like he's been prosecuted, then you do it, because you don't want someone out there exposing your lies and corruption and misdeeds to the public. And so if you have this campaign finance legislation, which is really, I think, unconstitutional, but it's there on the books, then you can use that to bring him down, put him away, and silence him. He's a political prisoner. And what he did was probably, it wasn't really illegal, but the way he did it was illegal. He bundled some contributions into one donation, and it exceeded the limits, or didn't list the people correctly, or whatever. It was a small amount, and his candidate lost. Most people would receive a fine, a warning, don't do it again. Disband your political action committee. It's not going to, no more PACs for you. And that would have been it. But Dinesh D'Souza has this movie. It's the highest grossing documentary movie of all time. And he's coming out with a sequel. They had a screening of the sequel at Liberty Fest 2 years ago. He's a great thinker. I don't agree with everything he says. He has some views which I think are kind of on they kind of tend to remind me of almost of a neocon type of a statements. And I don't think he's, exactly where I am in terms of how I see liberties and freedom, but he does have a lot of things that I think he gets right, and I want to give him credit for that. And I do think that he was unjustly persecuted, and I think that he shouldn't be in prison. I don't think Ross Ulbricht should be in prison. Hillary Clinton's walking free. She should be serving a life sentence for the crimes that she's committed against the people of this country. Every day, more testimony comes out, more emails are found that have classified designations, which meant to keep them on a private server was a clear violation of the law. And she said, well, they didn't have important information. She just happened to pose, one of the things that she had was Ambassador Stevens' itinerary for the next couple of months, where he's going to be, what place, where he's going to be, whatever. So if someone could hack into that and find that, they would know that he wouldn't be at the ambassador headquarters. He'd be at a safe house in some other, where was that location? I forgot where that was. Wherever. He'd be at the safe house, and being in that safe house, they could set up an ambush for him. Because this being a safe house means that most people don't know what goes on there. They don't even know that it's owned by the United States government. That sometimes the ambassador meets people there in secret because no one wants to be seen going in and out of their embassy in Tripoli. So it's very possible that her negligence, and I tell you, when you cause someone's death through negligence, what's it called? Manslaughter. That her negligence was responsible for the death of Ambassador Andrew Stevens. And what are we going to do about that? Are we going to let her stand up and say, what difference does it make? In the context of that statement that she made, she was saying, he's dead, let's move on. Because she really didn't want to talk about this more, because she knew that she really had screwed the pooch on this one. Shortly after this, she resigned from the State Department. I think she was forced out. Obama probably wanted her to fall on her sword to clear him of any involvement in this, and she said no. So he asked for her resignation, she resigned. And then they just kind of swept it under the rug. But, trust me, what she did was illegal. If it was anybody but a Democratic operative, apparatchik like Hillary Clinton, they'd be in prison. You know, there was a NSA whistleblower, a couple of them, William Binney, and the other guy's name was Drake. I don't remember his first name. And this guy Drake, he had taken home some files from his office, and they weren't classified. They were just files. They were available to the general public. And he was trying to use these as kind of a smoke, where there's smoke, there's fire, to get an investigation into the practices of the NSA. And he wanted to show them to some press people that he had contact with. And so what the NSA did is, after the fact that he had taken them from his office, they closed him out of the building so they couldn't return him. And then they classified him, and then they prosecuted him, saying that he was now in possession of classified files. And he was able to win his court case on this, and it's by a miracle, because it looked like he was going to go to prison. And Hillary Clinton is still free. They haven't even started an investigation. They haven't even threatened to start an investigation. Clearly, there are two sets of laws in this country. One for those of us who are the slaves, and another set for the slave owners. And Hillary Clinton is a slave owner. She's one of the elites. As George Carlin said, there's a big club that runs this country. And let me tell you the secret, you ain't in it. But she's hornswoggled her way into this club, and she wants her payoff. She's probably put up with a lot of stuff to get where she is, and she feels like it's owed to her. I mean, heck, she had to be married to Bill Clinton. That had to be a real trial. But I want you to know she's not an innocent person. There's no reason to feel sorry for her. She married Bill Clinton as a marriage of convenience, because she was not good enough to advance her career by herself. She had to be on somebody else's coattails, and he was willing to let her take a ride on his coattails. And she rode his coattails into the governor's mansion in Arkansas, and then into the White House. All the while making enemies everywhere she went, because she is not a people person. She's not a people pleaser. She's a sociopath that's out for only one purpose, and that is to enhance the life and future of Hillary Clinton. And she comes out and says she's broke, and she owns 5 estates in different places around the world. These are not just nice houses. These are estates. The cheapest one is valued at $5 million. She has over $50 million worth of the property in these 5 estates. As far as I know, they're all paid for. I wonder, where did she ever come up with that kind of money working as a government servant to the people? Maybe it was she was able to leak some state secrets to foreign countries to get donations for the Clinton Library, which they use. The Clinton Library purchased a jet, and they use that jet to fly around the world and using it as an expense of the Clinton Library. There's more and more and more to this. I don't want to go and get off track, but she is not the person she pretends to be. Not even close. And you don't even have to look very hard to find this, even though these stories aren't widely reported in the mainstream media. Surprise, 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 because they're scared shitless of her. They don't want to end up like Vincent Foster. They don't want to end up like Ambassador Andrew Stevens. The people that have tried to cross Hillary or have tried to stand up to her end up dead. So all you people out there that are Democrats, first of all, I kind of wonder, what the heck do you see in that party? But if you're a Democrat and you're supporting Hillary, you might want to spend some time really looking into her. Don't read her campaign propaganda. Look into some of the stuff that's happened over the last 30 years in her life, 40 years. Look at all. I mean, she was one of the lawyers on the Watergate legal team that was trying to take down Richard Nixon. And these people it was kind of a political maneuver they were doing, but they still wanted to go by the law. They wanted to do everything legally. They realized that Nixon had violated laws and had done unconstitutional things, and they wanted him to bring him down over those things. And Hillary lied, and her conduct was so bad, they kicked her off of the legal team. They said we didn't want her around. She was violating ethical procedures, and she was, well, that was her beginning of her career, her legal career. I mean, she has not ever performed any kind of ethical nature in her whole life. So I just wonder about Dinesh D'Souza, who's still in prison for raising $20,000 illegally. And we're all volunteer. The people that put the money in there were all voluntarily put the money in there, but I think that he kind of matched their donations with something of his own money or something. He did some things that we're not supposed to do. But nobody twisted anybody's arm. Nobody held a gun to anybody's head. And he took responsibility for it and went to prison. Hillary Clinton doesn't take responsibility for anything, and there are dead bodies laying around at her feet. There's a trail of them she leaves in her wake as she walks across the landscape. Why is Hillary Clinton walking around free? Why hasn't the Attorney General started an investigation into the wrongdoing surrounding her email server, private email server, which was a violation of the rules governing the people working in government, which have the same effect as a law passed by Congress. And the penalties that are there have those same effects. I just want to know. Greg Walden, why haven't we heard anything from you on this subject? Are you afraid? Are you a man? Do you have a backbone? We have 2 Democrat senators from the state of Oregon. I haven't heard a peep out of you guys either. Are you working behind the scenes? Are you trying to get her to step down? Or are you just kind of hoping nobody notices that you could say something? Do you want to be associated with her? Do you want to go down in this next election? That you come up and say, well, he didn't ever speak out against Hillary Clinton, who's obviously a criminal. I just don't know. I really don't know what these people are thinking. Those are my elected officials that I could talk to, and I don't trust any of them to do the right thing. I think it's a waste of my time, waste of my breath to even contact their offices. So, we've got to stop Hillary. We've got to stop being manipulated by the propaganda media. We've got to stop the Federal Reserve. We've got to stop the pharmaceutical companies from poisoning us with antidepressants and medicines that get into our water supply. Do you know that in most major cities there's estrogen in the water supply, so people are drinking and kind of being flooding their bodies with estrogen, which is a carcinogen. It's not a direct carcinogen, but it kind of sets your bodies up in the state where it's more easily attacked by a carcinogen. It kind of destroys your immune system. It's not, estrogen's kind of a dangerous thing to play around with. We have forests burning to the ground due to the malfeasance of people that are in government employment in places like they're all under the Department of the Interior, but it's like the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management and the National Park Service. These people should be losing their jobs for their management of these resources. Either that or they should be on the hook to pay the billions of dollars in losses that are occurring. And they say, well, it was an act of God. It wasn't an act of God that all that fuel load was left on the forest floor to burn catastrophically. And to cook the soil so deeply that it kills all the enzymes and the enzyme-producing microcell organisms that live in the soil and create a living soil that produces the nutrients that grows a new forest. They're all baked out of it, but these fires are so hot. So hot that the seeds can't germinate. No one pays a price for that. No one gets punished. Hillary Clinton doesn't get punished. Only the good get punished. Dinesh D'Souza was an honorable man. He gets punished with an abusive criminal sentence by a judge that was a political appointee of the Clintons. Oh, that's a big surprise there. So, that's all for this week. I'm going to sign out. I know this week we were going to try and get Mary Ruwart, but due to my inefficiency in making contact with her, I didn't leave her enough time to be prepared. So we're going to get her on at a later date. We're going to still try and get Jeffrey Tucker on, and we're going to try and get on as a surprise guest someone who's going to talk to some subjects that we normally don't talk about. This is crystals, their healing powers, possibly.